Alright guys, and welcome to another video. So some of our questions about Classic Wrath have been recently answered by Brian Birmingham from Blizzard in a Wowhead interview. So I want to give you a good TLDR of all the interesting things that happened in the interview, what I think about it. Because although a lot of things have been answered and concluded by this interview, there's also a lot of vagueness, which is a little concerning. Because if they're still this vague about what they're going to do with Classic Wrath, at this point, does that mean that it's going to be quite far away before we get a release? Only time will tell anyway. The first thing that has been very definitely confirmed is that there will be no Dungeon Finder. Okay, you can just give up all hope of Dungeon Finder happening in Classic Wrath of the Lich King. But they do say that they're looking at the pre-made group finder on retail and the Burning Crusade's current looking for group finder for inspiration ideas of a new system that they can put in. So we're going to get something totally brand spanking new in Classic Wrath of the Lich King when it comes to group making that we haven't seen before. I think what they'll do is just throw in the retail pre-made finder, bosh, done, Bob's your uncle, and I'll be extremely happy with that. When it comes to the topic of faction and race changing, 99.9% certain that it's not going to happen, because in this interview they're talking more about immersive, fantasy-focused ways of balancing the racials of the different factions and the different races, rather than just giving people the option to pay money to transform into a new race, because that would be, well, it wouldn't make sense. It would be immersion breaking. They talk a lot about how they understand how PvP players, they don't really care that much about immersion factors and fantasy factors. They really just want to have an even playing field when it comes to playing arena. They're looking at ways to balance racials more in PvP. They've hinted at this kind of joke idea that you won't be able to use racials in the arena, and then if you do use them, some goblin referee comes out and gives you a red card. Hopefully they are thinking of a good way to actually do this. They also hinted at having the option to choose what racials you want, but then it becomes difficult to predict what racials the enemy team has. I think the simple thing is just remove them. Just remove them. It's very simple. It's not exactly going to be game-changing or detrimental to the game if we can't war stomp anymore, and it will just totally balance PvP. They've talked a little bit about raid difficulty in comparisons to TBC Classic. So obviously in TBC Classic we've got pre-nerfed and post-nerf versions, and I think this is a really good way to do it personally. You know, you spend about a month and a half smashing the hardest content, and then it gets a little bit easier towards the end of that patch. But apparently in the original Wrath of the Lich King there wasn't really any actual pre-nerf or post-nerf content. They just kind of shipped it as it was, and they didn't really make that much changes. So we're just going to get the raids exactly how they were in the original Wrath of the Lich King, and that's it. Bob's your uncle. We also talked about the progressive nerf aura that is in Icecrown Citadel that gets more and more stronger every week. If you don't know, basically the raid got easier week by week with a little buff. And they're talking about how giving the players the option to manually select how nerfed or how buffed that they want the content in Icecrown Citadel. Personally, I think this is kind of cool because it gives the more casual guilds the option to go through the content at a much easier pace, and then more hardcore raiders, well, they can just bump up the difficulty to make it more challenging for themselves. They also said they're going to look at other ways to keep the content challenging. I don't know what that exactly means, but it kind of hints that they're going to do something new that they haven't done before. Hopefully that means heroic or hard modes for all the raids, but who knows what that will actually turn into. They've also hinted that they may make the Trial of the Grand Crusader raid have actable hard modes like it did in Ulduar, rather than having a separate heroic mode with its own lockouts, because they definitely do want to change the Trial of the Crusader lockouts, because as you know, they were a bit of a mess. There's 4 different ways that you can actually play that raid, and it was a bit ludicrous. So they're changing it to more modes to share the same lockout. For instance, normal and heroic mode will probably end up sharing the same lockout. But whatever it is that they do decide to do, they want it to be consistent from start to finish of the entirety of Classic Wrath of the Lich King's lifetime. They've also confirmed that they're not going to do any restrictions when it comes to dual talent specialization, so you can totally rush ahead with that one. It's going to be exactly how it was in the original Wrath of the Lich King. They have gone into a little bit more detail about faction and balancing, and obviously the issues that would have with Winter Grasp, and they are looking at ways to, well, just fix it What they've hinted at is higher stacks of like a tenacity kind of buff, so when the faction is imbalanced, they get buffed to help them defeat the opposite faction, and also some kind of backdoor idea, so easier access to the faction that keeps losing Wintergrasp. The backdoor idea sounds quite decent to be fair, or it's just some kind of method to make Wintergrasp easier for the faction that's lost it multiple times in a row. For instance, even the gates having less health, that would be pretty simple, or allowing people to make the demolishes easier. And I'll quick fire some last notable things. So in original Wrath of the Lich King, you could summon someone in to Ulduar to unlock the Algalon encounter. That did actually require a key, but they wouldn't get saved to the instant, so you could just like kick them out. So you could like basically pay people to unlock that boss for you. It's been confirmed that that's just a bug, and it's not going to be in Classic Wrath. Let's talk a little bit about Ring of Valor. Ring of Valor was shipped originally with fiery walls, moving platforms and everything, and they're just, you know, they're kind of on the fence and unsure about how they're going to ship Ring of Valor, because during its lifetime, you know, the fiery walls were removed. Not much to say here other than they are undecided about how they're going to do this. We also talked about how Nitro Boots were originally available to use in the arena for engineers, and TLDR, it kind of looks like Blizzard want to remove a lot of these things, you know, from a competitive arena, so people don't just have to chase the flavour of the month, the best in slot races and professions just to compete, and giving people the freedom to pick whatever character identity they want, rather than having to pick certain races because it's best. So I imagine a lot more things like that are going to be streamlined and removed from the arena. Anyway guys, that is the TLDR of all the most new recent information about Classic Wrath. My name is MetaGoblin. To the next video, ciao.